Hello and welcome everyone to Youth Activism Project Presents School Policing Research Presentation. We are so excited that you are here. We're just going to give everybody a minute to arrive at this live and join us. So welcome everybody. My name is Charlotte Huffman. I am the year-round program director of Girls Rock Campaign Boston, let me read our mission. Girls Rock Campaign Boston empowers girls, women, and youth and adults with marginalized gender identities to believe in themselves by supporting I'm gonna go a little slower. Girls Rock Campaign Boston empowers girls, women, and youth and adults with marginalized gender identities to believe in themselves by building a supportive community that fosters self-expression, confidence, and collaboration through music education and performance. We're so happy you're here today. What you're about to see is the culmination of work that the Youth in Youth Activism Project have been working on this year. In September, these youth came together, they chose an issue that really spoke to them, which was police in schools, and they started doing research. The fall semester, they spent creating a survey, sending it out, doing an amazing job collecting data. This winter, they took the data that they collected and they started making meaning out of it. We're really excited for them to share what they've learned with you. And this spring, they'll be switching their efforts from research and education over into activism. So please keep an eye out for things coming up soon, announcements coming from us soon as they figure out how they want to create activism around this issue. We're really excited for this spring. So what's going to happen today is the youth are going to introduce themselves. We're going to share their presentation with you, and then we're going to open up to a live Q&A. So they're going to facilitate it. You all please put your questions in the chat as they come up, and they will answer them as when the Q&A opens up. Okay, so I think it's time for introductions. Is that right? Yeah. All right. So take it away. Why don't we start with Carolyn?
Hi, I'm Carolyn. I use she, her pronouns. I love cooking and playing the bass.
Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I use she, her pronouns, and I like watching TV and reading books.
Thora.
Hi, I'm Thora. I use she, her pronouns, and I love to play music in my free time.
And Esme.
Hi, I'm Esme. I use she, her pronouns. I'm 15 years old and I love reading and drawing and also playing bass guitar.
Awesome. So these are the youth you're going to be hearing from. I'm going to start their presentation. Please put all your questions in the chat.
Hi everyone, today we're going to be sharing the research findings of our project that we did over the past semester where we were researching school policing and how it impacts minorities in the Boston area. We started our research by creating a series of surveys for people in our community, asking them a series of questions about school policing, their experience with it, if having police in their schools makes them feel safe, etc. These surveys collected data from the community of our peers, student age, and adult here in Massachusetts. These are our findings. I'm Esme, and I'm going to start by talking a little bit about one of the research projects we did this semester. We started our project on school policing by creating a series of surveys for people in our community about this topic, asking what their experience is with school policing, if having police in schools makes them feel safe, etc. And we'll start by sharing the data we received from our student survey, where we asked questions of school-age people in our community of youth in the Massachusetts area. So we started by asking a series of demographic questions just to get an idea of who our respondents were. As you can see, even though we targeted people in Massachusetts, we did get a couple from various places around the world. We got answers from people in 7th grade all the way up to 10th grade, so a pretty wide scope of ages there. As you can see, the majority of our respondents identified as female, which is probably in part because many of them come from the Girls Rock campaign community, and there is a wide variety of sexual orientations among our respondents. We also asked about people's race and ethnicity and found that the majority of our respondents, 60%, identified as white, while 40% identified as Asian, Black, or African American, and Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander. This is by no means a perfect sample. As we've seen, the people who took our survey were predominantly female, and here we can see people's race and ethnicity don't exactly match the general population, and we've not tried to extrapolate our answers to a wider population for this reason. But for the most part, this is a good representation of the youth community that we reached out to collect data for this survey. So after we finished asking about demographics, we moved on to people's experience with school policing and their opinions about it. As you can see, almost 80% of our respondents said they go to a school with policing or that they have in the past. Just 22% said they've never gone to school with police. We also asked if they had had any negative experiences with police in their school. 13% said that they have, while the remaining 86% said they have not. In response to our question of whether police in school made them feel safer or less safe, 41% said that they felt less safe with police at school, while 36% said that they feel safer with police at school, and 23% said that having police doesn't affect their feelings of safety one way or the other. On the next couple of slides, we have some answers written by our respondents. Here's what they said on the question of whether they've had a negative experience with police at school. One said, 2 years ago, someone brought a gun into school and threatened to shoot. We had to go into a lockdown for hours while the police were working hard to find the student and etc. Luckily, there was no harm to anyone at school, and the police did their job, and I am thankful for that, even though I've not been impressed by or approved of the recent police system. Another said, it was just them following me to every class. And finally, they would follow me, and one time they yelled at me because I pushed someone into a locker. I received a 3-day suspension from this. We also asked if school policing affected you, if it has affected them and their friends or family. Some said yes, both family and friends, yes greatly, yes sadly. Some said no, that the police haven't really bothered anyone and they were just there for emergencies. One said, my friends go to school with policing and they do not like it. And another said, it hasn't really affected us other than the fact that the cops know me purely because of my mom working there at school. And our final question was asking whether or not they want to have police in their schools. Here you can see that 68% of them would rather not have police in their schools compared to the 32% who would rather have police. So we found the results from this past question interesting because the vast majority of our respondents said earlier that they have not had a negative experience with police in their school, and only 41% said that they feel safer at school without police. But here you can see that the majority would not like to have police in their school regardless. So the opinion of youth in our community that we polled seems to be against having police in their schools, even the students where the police are not directly affecting their well-being at school.
For the adult survey, we proceeded just like the other ones, and for this one, it includes parents, teachers, and school administrators. We started off by asking them a little bit about themselves so we could get a feel of where these people are coming from and experiences that they may have and how that could affect their answers. For the demographics, we started by asking just a few questions so we could get to know them. 5% of our survey takers were gender fluid, 10% identified as cis male, and 85% identified as cis female. And sexual orientation, 5% would rather not say, 75% are straight, 10% pansexual, and 10% were lesbian. When it comes to their ethnicity, Black or African American was 20% of the survey takers. Black or West Indian was 5%, no reply was 5%, and 70% were white. And when asked if you were Hispanic, Latinx, or Spanish, 20% said yes and 80% said no. And when asked to pick the category that best described them, 40% were parent or guardians, 10% were school admins, and 50% were teachers.
This is the segment of the survey that we created to learn more about the parents or guardians of students who go to school with policing. We started by asking the parents what grade or grades their children were in and found, as earlier, a wide range of grades or ages, this time ranging from primary school all the way up to college freshmen. About 60% of our respondents' children attend school here in Massachusetts, which is good for the purposes of our survey because we've been trying to learn more about people in the local community specifically, and 62% said that their child attends a school where there are police. Now, interestingly enough, when we continued asking questions about their experience with police in schools, The entirety of the group of parents we polled said that their child has never felt threatened by police at school and that policing has never affected their child's performance in the classroom. This was interesting to us because, compared with the responses we got from students, the parent group seems far less concerned about the effect of school policing on their kids than the students themselves are. Compare this with the 41% of student respondents who said that they feel safer without the police at their school compared to having police at school. We asked if their child has ever had a negative experience with police at school, and again, the majority said no. The one parent who said yes added, overall, the officer in their school is brief and authoritative with the children in the school. They feel that he is only there to punish you. When asked if they feel safer with or without police at their children's school, 43% said that they feel safer without police, while 57% said they feel safer with. Finally, we asked if they would rather have police at their child's school or not. 37.5% said that they would, while 62.5% said that they would not. Again, as seen in the student survey earlier, a greater percentage seems to be against having police in their schools than the percentage who said that they have been directly affected by school police.
Here we have the teacher part of our survey. So this is the basic outline of the grades that these teachers taught or are currently teaching. For the question of, do you feel safer with or without police on campus during school hours? 70% of teachers feel safer without police on campus, and 10% of teachers say they feel safer with police on campus. Now, from the excerpt up top, we also find that it's important to note that the teacher, even though she stated that police were at the school due to violence, this teacher still said that they feel safer without police on campus. The next question was, have you ever had a negative encounter with school police? And here there's an encounter. It says, police have been called on two of my students. One student, second grade, was having a breakdown, and I had been able to help him self-regulate, but police officers showed up to take him to the hospital in an ambulance. The other incident, a parent was being threatening. Police were called, and the student, a fifth grader of that parent, got agitated and ended up being shoved against a table and handcuffed. And this is very triggering to some people, and regardless of your status, this should never happen. Now, does the school where you work have school policing? Now, with this question, some of the responses we got was they don't actually know because police have been called on campus. They just don't know if the police work with the school. Or some of them do have school policing and they never knew or know how long that school policing has been happening. Here, has school policing affected your students' performance in the classroom? 55.6% of teachers responded yes to this prompt, and 44% of teachers said no. Now, it is important to note that only 5 teachers said yes, and then 4 said no, which is different from the parents because, once again, teachers are within the schools and parents are not. So they have firsthand accounts of what they see. And for facts, there is no conclusive evidence that police in schools improve either students' mental health, educational outcomes, or their safety. Instead, this practice has led to the criminalization of youth, particularly youth of color and those with disabilities, and has helped to create the school to prison pipeline. At a time when impending institutional racism is finally being recovered as a priority, this outsized investment in locating police in school setting is misplaced. Instead, resources should be devoted to providing schools with social, emotional, and behavioral support they will need as they return to school in the middle of an ongoing public health emergency. Now, with this, we noticed that it was appalling and strange that most schools that do have school policing, they do not actually have any sort of counseling for their students. They don't have trauma counseling or just anyone that the students can talk to, which is really telling. And students, me being one, you definitely need support while you're in school.
So for the administration section of the survey, we only got 2 responses, which is important to consider while we look at the data. One respondent is a director, and the other one was a former student support staff member. For the first question, do you feel safer with or without police on campus during school hours? 50% of administrators said they feel safer without police, while the other person never has experienced school without police, but believes that they would be safer without school policing. Actually, for these 2 questions, the answers were the same. Does the school where you work have school policing, and have you ever felt threatened by the presence of police in your school? So one respondent said yes, and the other one said no for both of them. And for the next question, we have you ever had a negative encounter with police in your school? Both respondents said that they have had negative experiences with school police officers. They both witness SRRs raise their voice, physically restrain and or remove students for not conforming to their demands. And then 50% have had positive interactions with the police. How has school policing affected you and your family or friends? School police escalate situations with students. Their presence is a security theater with real consequences, especially for kids of color. The other respondee, who is a woman of color administrator and attended school with police when she was younger, says that she has never trusted the police and in general. As a public school student, I saw that police constantly abuse their power and mistreated students of color, often treating them as criminals. So this suggests that school police generally do not have the best interest of Black and Brown students. They do not care for their well-being, and some are focused on using their power. So both respondents acknowledge that school police escalates situations with students, and one respondent noticed that there's a lack of patience and experience with Black and Brown students, and this can prompt teachers and administration to call the school police. So alternatives to school policing, according to a 2019 report by the American Civil Liberties Union of Southern California, numerous school districts of California across California removed mental health services to add police after the Colombian school shooting, 9/11, and the 2008 recession. Recently, some school districts are deciding to put funding towards hiring school counselors instead of police. So this is important because the national student to counselor ratio currently is 444 to 1, and the American School Counselor Association recommends a 250 to 1 ratio. A UCLA study found a 906% increase in the incidents that mental health counselors could have taken care of instead of police. These incidents can range from suicidal threats to misbehavior related to trauma, which are incidents that counselors are more fit to handle than officers.
When it came to missing information, when I was researching for my surveys, there were a lot of different sources saying different things. In 2018, it became mandatory by law to report school-based arrests to the state's Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. In Boston Public Schools, the largest district in the state with more than 50,000 students, reported only 4 school-based arrests, and those numbers don't add up. During the 2018-2019 academic year, that would not make any sense because the school is reporting more arrests than where they were reporting to the state. And Boston Public Schools told WPR that there were 114 school arrests in that year, and that is not the number that they told the state. Springfield Public Schools reported 0 arrests to the state and later said there were 75 arrests in the 2018-2019 school year. And at the same time, you have to take into account that many of these schools have different models of school policing. While some schools have police officers that are just wearing normal clothes and act more as guidance counselors, while others have police officers who are armed and coming into school. So the administration can take those differently, depending on how they feel the police are acting in their schools.
So next Saturday, we will be having a panel discussion with activists and experts. And then the next Monday, April 12th, we will be having a YouTube live video premiering about creativity in politics. And if you want, you can tag Yap on Instagram. Anyone is invited for both of them. So here are some mental health resources.
Thank you for coming. And if you ever have any questions, you can email us at youthactivismprojectboston@gmail.com. And you could also find us on Instagram at youthactivismproject. Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for watching this presentation. I'm so proud of these youth for the hard work they've done, and I'm about to turn it over. I just want to make sure that we put a link in the chat to the Youth Activism Project website. Nora's going to do that for me, as well as a link in the chat to donate to GRCB to help support this program. The work that these youth are doing is amazing. We're really proud of them and the hard work that they've done. So please help support us in supporting them. Now I'm going to turn it over to the youth for the Q&A.
Thank you, Charlotte. Yeah, so this is the Q&A section. Please ask any, questions as you would in a Q&A.
So the first question we got, sorry, do you want to go?
Yeah, okay, so the first question we have, it says, why do you think 11th graders were the highest portion of the feedback givers?
I can take a shot at answering that. I would say that 11th graders were the highest amount of people that answered because, one, you also want to think of their age. They are more willing to speak out about what has happened to them. Whereas if you are in a younger grade, some people will be scared of backlash. Whereas an 11th grader, they've been through this. They're almost done with high school. And so they probably have that more of a drive to change what can happen for the younger grades below them or people to come.
Can I add a little something to that? I think absolutely that is definitely a possible reason why we had more older students answering our survey than younger students. Another reason is one of the ways that we reached out was over social media and using a couple different emailing lists, sort of resources that younger students who might not be online or plugged into various social media outlets, they might not have access to.
Yeah, I agree with both of them. That makes sense to me.
I agree as well. The next question, someone says, I think it's interesting that some respondents said there are no negative issues, but their comments revealed otherwise. What do you think about that and how we communicate conflict?
I think that some people can take smaller issues as not being conflict, but then you look back on it and you can think otherwise, because that's happened to me before. Like, I won't think something's a big deal, but then later on I'll realize, oh, that is actually a big thing. So as we ask questions, maybe they could have realized what happened was actually a conflict they had or something around those lines.
Yeah, absolutely. Not all of the issues that are created by having police in schools are like arrests or large dramatic events that everybody notices?
Yeah, I think it depends, like, within their friend circle, like, if their friends aren't being involved with the police, then they might not notice it. But then when we ask them these questions, they'll, like, reflect on it more and say, "Oh, well, I might have noticed one thing about it in school."
I'd have to agree with what all the girls said. I mean, it's one thing from being in a school environment and you're in school every day. And so whatever might happen, it might seem like a small incident, or you might not think much of an incident. And then maybe a few weeks down the line, you're like, well, what this person said is a little sketchy, or, this is a big thing. So I feel as we ask these questions, we do want to keep in mind that, they can come out and people can say what they need to say.
Absolutely. And the parent group that we pulled, unlike most of the other people that we were pulling, like the school administrators, teachers, actual students, they're not actually in the school building on a day-to-day basis. And that might have an effect on the way that they don't have as many incidences of school policing to report, or the way that they don't seem quite as concerned about it as the other groups, since they aren't exposed to that sort of everyday small conflicts.
The next question we have is, are there any questions that you wish you had asked? I guess I can answer first. Me personally, there's no questions that I wish I had asked, but maybe we should have gone about speaking to police officers in school or people enforcing these types of things and see how that would have maybe changed our point of view or like furthered what we already thought.
I'd have to agree. I feel if we had a bigger outreach, or if we opened up our survey to more people, we definitely could have had more responses. And this whole, thing could have just been so different from what it is now.
We can definitely look forward to learning more about different points of view as we go forward with this project.
I agree completely. I think we could have opened up our outreach more. The next question is, how has doing this research impacted you?
For me, I don't go to a school that has like directly police officers in it or armed officers or anything like that, but the rules are very strict. And when we were speaking to some people, they were saying that is a form of policing, and it like opened my eyes to like more things around me and how like everything is just nothing is there for no reason. So everything's there to like police something. And yeah, sometimes it was like a bit overwhelming on like, oh wow, I didn't know this was happening to some people like right over there.
Yeah, it definitely was a little bit overwhelming at times. That's a good way to describe it. Just because going through our research, we had to read about like all these different incidents that happened in schools, people getting arrested. And, it is overwhelming, but it's also something that's really important to, read about, educate yourself about, so you can be part of making a difference about that. And I guess for me, that was something that changed me a little bit, since this wasn't something that I just thought about on a day-to-day basis before we started this project.
For me, it was overwhelming at times, and I did have a lot of anxiety as I was doing this project. And I know there was definitely times in my head, I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore, because it was a lot to take in and to read reports about what was happening. But at the same time, I'm like, I am gaining so much information, and I could possibly help so many other people if I do this, or if I step out of my own comfort zone to help other people. And it was such an eye-opener, and I really am glad that I did it and stuck through.
I also go to a school without school policing, so it was eye-opening, and at times it was very overwhelming, and I had to step back a little and like do some self-care and just make sure everything, just make sure I just keep going with it, because it has impacted me a lot.
Yeah, self-care is definitely really important when you're learning about this, like, sort of heavy topics, because you want to be able to make a change, but you also want to take care of yourself so you don't burn out halfway through and not be able to help people with what you've learned. So I feel like we all did a pretty good job with that.
The next question we have is, were there administrators who responded from the same schools and the parents/youth who responded? The administrators weren't specifically from any of the schools that the parents and youth were responding from, but there were some cases where youth had their parents and parents had their youth do the survey. And that was interesting because sometimes they had like opposite answers and opinions on what school policing was to them.
I don't think on the question of which particular schools, we didn't ask which particular schools people went to, just to like preserve a little bit of extra privacy for them. But a lot of them said that they went to school in the Boston area, specifically the Cambridge area. And so it was kind of a lot of people from the local area, even if they wouldn't have all gone to the same specific schools.
The next question says, do you have plans to collaborate with others doing similar research or presenting this research to the state or Department of Education to make larger changes?
I can answer. We are currently partnering with a few other youth activism groups, and we are thinking about doing other collabs with them and doing workshops. But at the moment in time, everything's still a work in progress. And so we do have our other panel next week with further experts and people that are more educated and that can further educate us. So like I said, it is a work in progress, but we're really looking forward to what the future can hold with this.
Okay, the next question says, in your research, did you discover ways the students, teachers, and parents can address these systems or groups that we can support that are doing this work? Well, off the top of my head, there's no groups that are coming to my mind. We didn't really look into these things, but we can definitely post resources on our Instagram page and our link tree and stuff like that for groups that could be helpful in these matters.
I think we did find some like various organizations that are working to make change in public schools, and we can absolutely put together a sort of resource guide of sorts to guide people towards where they can donate or make a bit of a change.
Okay, that seems to be the last question. And if anyone has any more questions, please put them in the chat.
During this break, I'm just gonna say I'm gonna put a link in the chat for a place where you can donate to GRCB and specifically for YAP. And I'm gonna put a link to their website as well, the YAP website. And please do follow YAP on Instagram if you have Instagram at Youth Activism Project. They run this Instagram account and it's amazing. I highly suggest a follow. So as more questions come in, you all can keep answering. I just wanted to say that.
So the next question is, are there any of the schools using restorative justice practices?
I personally have never heard of restorative justice practices, so I can't really speak on that, but maybe one of the other girls can if they've heard of it before.
I think we did do some research on various like different places in the world that are looking on ways to like, sorry, I'm trying to think of the word for it, like alternatives to school policing. I know there were a couple of towns in California that completely got rid of police in their schools and did, in fact, start doing restorative justice. And I think there were a couple of articles we read about that we could try and find as like resources, but that is a pretty promising alternative that we learned about, instead of just keeping police on hand to solve conflicts that don't require police or military seeming presence.
I don't know too much about this, but I know that Worcester started taking out the school police like a month ago. Yeah, so I'm definitely gonna look into that more.
Like the other girls, I don't know much about it, but some articles I read, schools took out policing and instead put in guidance counselors and trauma counselors so that students can get help whenever they need it. And they went a step further and trained their teachers and staff to resolve conflict without police being called. But we will all definitely do more research on this.
Yeah, that's definitely something we should look into as we continue our project.
The next question says, is there activism you are interested in pursuing about this issue?
Well, sorry, go ahead, Thora.
In short, yes. And this spring, I believe, no, next season over, we are planning on to do more outreach and either more workshops, definitely more research, and basically anything we can do at this point to just spread the word and spread our research and our findings, and hopefully get in contact with other people and make a change, because that's what we're all about, making change.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, our resources are a little bit limited now during COVID, since everything has to be virtual, and it's a bit harder to organize events sort of than it would be when in person was more of an option. But we are definitely planning on doing more to, like you said, spread the message about this and reach out to people.
The next question is, do you plan to share this presentation with your schools? For me, I would say no, just because my school doesn't have school policing. But yeah, does anyone have any output on this?
Me personally, I would say no. One, my school is very strict on what can be shared. Even if it's a simple presentation like this, they are very strict on it. I do go to a charter school, so that's probably another reason. But I do know some staff members or previous staff members that worked at my school, and they would probably love to see this. So if I ever get the chance, I will definitely be sharing this with them.
I go to the same school as Thora, and yes, it is very strict, but I would say yes, because like, how are you going to make any changes if you're not bringing light onto issues that you're facing? The school that we go to doesn't have like direct school policing, but it's very policed in your actions and the way you're allowed to move and the things you're allowed to do and things like that, as most schools are. But it's like a different kind of thing, I guess, to me at least, as a student in the school.
Do we have any more questions, or sorry?
The next question is, do you have any questions that haven't been answered through your research yet? For me, it's about why isn't the information consistent throughout and why everything is so different. But at the same time, it's the middle of a pandemic and the research hasn't been able to have all the perfect information since everyone's doing different versions of school?
I would say yes. I mean, I would also like to know why things are inconsistent. And also, as we were reading through documents, I would also like to know why these cases of arrests in school were never being reported, because that was just a big shocker that, you know, it's a law. You have to report these things, but yet you are not reporting them to DESE. You aren't reporting them to people higher up that need to know this in order to make change. So that's a real thinker for me. And I would also like to know what actions are schools taking to fix this, because it's clearly a huge problem that people are not changing.
We have done some research into alternatives to school policing, like we were talking about earlier, but like, you know, restorative justice, replacing officers with guidance counselors and people who serve like less, you know, a more compatible role in schools. But we've really only scraped the tip of the iceberg so far, since there's so many different possible solutions. And I personally would be really interested into looking more into that so we can see which are most promising, which might be best as a solution.
I would also want to look into more alternatives, and I also want to know why the information isn't consistent.
Is there any more questions? Are there any more questions? I don't see anything in the chat. But if you do have any more questions, last minute questions, please do put those in the chat. And if not, we will wrap this up.
All right. Yeah, let's wrap this up. Great job, everyone. I'm so proud of all of you. And thank you, everyone who came and watched this presentation and participated by adding your questions in the chat. I just put a link in the chat for the workshop series. So please join us again next Saturday. These YAP youth are going to be facilitating a panel with experts and activists who will be able to share even more information on school policing. So please tell your friends, tell your family, join us back here, YouTube Live, 1:30 next Saturday for our panel discussion. All right, is there anything you all would like to say before we close?
Thank you for coming.
Thank you all so much for joining.
Yeah, thank you all so much for joining and allowing us to share this information with you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
All right,
Thank
we
you.
did it.
Hang on, are we still live?